Hi, welcome to the session on performing well in psychometric tests. I'm Louise Setti and I'm joined by my colleague Helen Frost, and together we're going to take you through some key information to help you feel more confident when you come to do these as part of a recruitment exercise. So, in today's session, we're going to give a brief introduction to the different types of tests that you may come across, why they're used, and which employers are using them. We'll include some worked example questions along with some strategies and tips to help you prepare and perform better on the day. So it's likely that you will face some sort of psychometric test when you are applying for graduate roles, internships, or placement years, perhaps even insight weeks that are run by larger employers. It's very common for the biggest employers offering graduate schemes and internships to request that you do a psychometric test as part of their recruitment process. Particularly true of large organizations in finance, engineering, manufacturing, retail, and energy. Now, the Institute of Student Employers, that's a body representing the larger graduate employers, conducted a survey about student and graduate recruitment and found that almost 60% of employers were using some form of psychometric tests. So why are they doing that? Well, employers use them to predict your likely performance in a job and to assess your suitability. In the majority of cases, the results have been standardized, and it's a very structured and fair way to assess certain personal characteristics like reasoning skills, motivations, and behaviors. They provide a recruiter with additional information beyond what can be gleaned from your CV and your your academic grades alone. Also, from a purely practical perspective, it allows a company that might receive 1,000 applications or more, say for 20 jobs, to reduce this number of applications in the most efficient way possible. It may seem really harsh when you spent several hours working on your application, but it does serve to explain why so many candidates don't get through this stage. So please don't take it to heart if you are rejected at this point. Bounce back, learn from the experience, and move on. A lot of people take fright at the idea of doing a psychometric test. So if you've prepared and you're willing to just work through the test at a nice steady rate and complete it, you're already ahead of the game. So what types of tests are there? Well, the most popular tests over the last 10 years or so have been verbal and numerical reasoning tests, followed by situational judgment tests, which have seen a significant growth in use in recent years. And later we'll look at some examples. We've also seen the introduction of ability tests that take the form of a computer game, and about 10% of graduate recruiters use these. And Helen's going to actually demonstrate what one of these might look like. So when you're doing a psychometric test, your score will be compared to a norm group. So this is a group of people with a similar level of educational attainment to yourself. This means you won't be compared to the general population. So, as I've said, these tests tend to be used by big companies and public sector organizations that recruit for a large number of entry-level graduate roles. They're very common in sectors such as finance, engineering, management consultancy, and IT, but less common in the charity sector, media, and creative industries. They're also less likely to be used by what we call SMEs, so small, medium-sized employers, typically employing fewer than 250 people. So Let's just have a look at situational judgment tests. This type of test explores how you're likely to behave in a work-based situation similar to those that you will encounter in the job. And the employer wants to know if your behavior and values fit with their organization. You're usually given a scenario and you'll be asked to rank different options, identify your most and least preferred options, or a combination of the two. These tests are often not timed, so there is less time pressure. But the challenge that students often face is that the right answers will depend on who the employer is and what particular qualities and behaviours they're looking for. So here, understanding the employer and their values is absolutely key. So it's important to read all the information they send you and do your research. Checking the information under the About Us tab of their website is a good starting point. Now, with the situational judgment test, you may encounter written examples, video clips, or even a virtual reality scenario. So what I'm going to do is show you a little video clip, which is part of a situational judgment test set by the Cabinet Office. And you'll have a chance to just take a view on what would be the right response to the questions put to you. So what I'm going to do now is just see if I can call this up by doing a new share. Okay. And let's play this.
You're sitting at your desk. Suzanne comes over.
Hi, I'm glad I could catch you today. I wanted to speak to you about these conference calls. Once a week is a bit much, don't you think? Most people just share the same information and end up repeating themselves. To be honest, I try to just carry on with my work when I'm on the call. If someone needs something from me, they can just ask, right? Can you make them every 2 weeks? Or, even better, we could just send an email if there are updates.
So you've seen the video and you've got these options to choose from. Now, what you have to do is think about the role that you've applied for, the values of that organization, and what you would be doing if you were recruited into that position. And in the light of that knowledge, you have to assess the question. And here you've seen a little video recording and you have to decide what is the best response. So you have to decide for each of these, is it counterproductive, ineffective, fairly effective, or effective? Now, we don't know for sure what the correct answer is, but we've had a good think about this, and this is what we came up with, that the first option was effective, the second one ineffective, and the next one fairly effective, and the final one counterproductive. And this is because we have thought about the values of that organization and the importance they place on involving everybody in a team and ensuring that everybody participates. Now, if we just go on, with this one, you're going to be asked to imagine that you are part of a current project, you're working with colleagues across finance and marketing, and you need them to provide you with some critical information before you're able to get on with your own tasks. Now, you have to imagine that you've been waiting for this information. It was due yesterday, and it's now the following day, and you can't actually get on with your work until you have that information. And you have to decide what you're most likely to do and least likely to do. So again, as a team, we considered this and we decided that that is what we would most likely do and least likely do. Now, the reason we came up with that is we had looked at the information we were given. You look at the information given to you, you park any knowledge you may have, and you then decide on the best possible response. Okay, so this applies to a situational judgment test question or verbal reasoning test question. You go off the information given to you. And so based on that, we decided on these responses. So with situational judgment test questions, you have to be prepared for these to be presented in different forms. It might be a video, or it might be a paragraph that you read and respond to, or you may actually be in a situation where they're using virtual reality. You may be asked to take part in an assessment centre, and you may even have the opportunity to wear a virtual sort of reality headset so that you actually feel like you're in the situation that you are answering a question on. And we know that the police do use virtual reality scenarios as part of some of their recruitment processes. So, situational judgment tests can cause a lot of concern and raise questions from students. For instance, what's the right answer? How do you know and how to prepare? And our advice would be to do your research, firstly on the organisation, what skills and qualities are sought for the role, and what are the values of the organisation, and have a clear sense of the behaviours sought so you can just feel more confident about it. Understand what the organisation is looking for and what they want to do in the future, and think about their competencies, values, priorities, goals and challenges. Practice some questions to get under the skin of what these types of scenarios are about. We link to Graduates First, an assessment day from the psychometric pages of our website, so you can do some practice tests. And later on, Helen will show you how to log on to Graduates First. So recognise that these questions give you an insight into the likely job you'll be doing. Ask yourself, is this the right job for you? And I'm now going to hand over to Helen so she can talk to you about games assessments.
So yeah, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about these games-based assessments, because we've all heard of them, but they sound a bit unusual. We don't quite know what to expect, and basically what they are quite quick, normally, rapid response games. Sometimes they're longer, interactive scenarios, but about 10% of employees use them. And so they're less common than the normal, verbal and numerical reasoning tests that you might have heard of, which we're going to look at in a bit more detail later on. They do exist for certain companies, so it's as well to understand what they are, just in case you're faced with them. So what they do is, you might think, well, how does this measure any ability that I have to be able to do this job? But what they're actually doing, and they're so clever, is they collect thousands of data points over a number of different games quite often. So it might be that you get 2 or 3 games to do rather than just one. And that reveals aspects of your behaviour, your personality, that they then benchmark against what it is they're looking for in that particular role or in their organisation. So the thing to remember with these is there isn't a correct or a best approach. Quite often there's not a right answer, but what they will be looking for is maybe things that link in with their values or with certain behaviour that they're looking for you to exhibit. So what I thought we might do now is have a look at a real one of these in action. So I'm going to share something. Hopefully you can see my screen now. So Louise is maybe going to mention later about a website that we have access to called Graduates First, which is where you can practice different types of tests. This is one of them, and this is using that particular platform. And I've gone in and I've searched for a games-based assessment, and this is what's come up. So you can go into the the instructions to find out exactly what it is. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to go straight to playing the game so that you can see it. So when I click play, what is going to be on the screen is a scene with a number of balloons that will inflate when I press a button. In fact, let me start it and you can see. There we go. So you can see there's a balloon at the bottom of the screen. I've got buttons saying inflate me and collect me. I've got a sort of banking summary up here. And then on the right, top right, this is how many balloons I've got left or what number balloon I'm on. So every time I press inflate me, the balloon gets bigger. And the decision I have to make is how many times should I click that inflate me button before the balloon pops. So you can see that every time I inflate it, my money is going up in the left-hand corner here. So I'm going to leave that one there and say collect me. Once I've collected, that money is safe in my account. So I'm then on to the next balloon. So I'm going to inflate and see what happens. And it's burst. Okay, so then I'm going to go on to the next one. So balloon number 3, going to see how far I can inflate this one. Right, this one's going quite high. Okay, now I'm going to collect, and that money has gone into my account at the top left. So you get the idea. Let me just flick back onto my other screen. Right, so we're back onto this screen now. So you've got an idea for what a games-based assessment is. As I mentioned before, there's quite a few of these for you to try on the Graduates First website, which we will give you a link to later on. Can anybody guess what they think this game might be measuring? I don't know if you just want to maybe put your suggestions in the chat as you were watching me play that game there. Just pop your thoughts in the chat. What do you think that game was measuring? What are that company looking for? So someone's already put risk taking, which is one suggestion. What else? Risk taking, pressure and risk. Anything else? Do you think it might be testing anything other than risk taking? Decision making, yeah. Learning. So are you learning from when you failed in the past? Experience-based judgment, great. Safe, do you play it safe maybe? Greed, that's a great one. So are you someone who just goes for the money all the time? Are you quite competitive about this? Analytical ability, great, that's some really good answers, thank you very much. So I suppose, yes, you're right. I mean, we don't know for sure what this game is testing. I'm going to share something with you in a second which shows you the output of when we've played this game in the past. And in Graduates First, it actually gives you sort of your results at the end, so you can see what they were measuring and what you might do different next time. So I'll show you that in a second. But I would guess that this is demonstrating whether you get flustered by making mistakes, whether you're quite consistent. Do you do the same number of inflates each time, or do you vary it? Do you take risks? Do you learn? So there was some really good answers that came out then. One thing these sorts of tests aren't measuring is anything to do with your dexterity, hand-eye coordination, or skill in that sense. It tends to be more behavioural based. So this is an example of the output that you might get from a game like this. So what it's telling me, it might be quite small on your screen, this, so I'll just read some of the points out. What it's telling me is that it's measuring whether you're a nervous person or whether you're quite relaxed and calm. So that's making me think that something around the speed it takes you to click might be being measured. It might be demonstrating whether you are confident in situations where you have to make quick decisions versus not, whether you're a risk taker, whether you're risk averse. So that's one thing that it might be measuring. Another might be about whether you prefer structure to your work, or whether you are very organized or not, whether you adapt based on the situation, or whether you show very extreme behavior. So someone that clicks really quickly might be someone who, gets frustrated quite easily. Another thing that this is said to manage, although I can't quite see myself how it measures this, is your sociability. And by that, it means whether you are someone who's quite outgoing and enjoys the company of others, or do you prefer spending time alone or prefer a more reserved style? So with my basic knowledge, I can't tell how they've inferred that from that particular game, but psychologists design these, and there's obviously a reason, and there's research that's been done that do demonstrate that. So hopefully that just gives you a rough idea of what's measured in those sorts of games-based tests. Other examples of game-based tests might be one that tests altruism. So you might have a game where you have a pot of money and you need to share it out in the fairest way, maybe between another individual and yourself. So it comes back to maybe greed. Do you share? And as Louise mentioned before, different companies may be looking at different things here. So if you think of maybe the difference between an investment bank and the NHS, two quite opposite ends of the scale there, they might be looking for very different results in those sorts of questions. So always think about the company that you're applying to, the values they have, and maybe what they might be expecting. Although I would say it's always best to be genuine and be yourself and authentic in these sorts of tests, because if you try and cheat, then it might not work out well for you. You might end up in an organisation that isn't right, for example. So I think I said before that these sorts of tests don't tend to be rated positive or negative. It's more just a general sort of blended assessment of your cognitive ability, so how you think, as well as your personality and any particular traits that you've got. But also they've been designed to see whether you fit the role, whether they think that you would work well in the tasks that you're given, the responsibilities that you have, whether you fit into the culture as well. So lots of different things that they can measure, things like drive, things like cognition, so the time it takes you to process or retain information, maybe something to do with your emotion or interpersonal style. So do you see non-verbal cues? And by that we mean, do you read body language? Do you have empathy with a particular situation? Do you adjust your behaviour depending on something that you see? Or maybe your thinking style, you know, are you an agile decision maker, or actually are you a bit slower? Do you like to think things through? Do you like to base things on research rather than going with gut feel? All sorts of things. It's fascinating, but I recognise that it's not nice to take these tests thinking that you're being assessed. So yeah, I'm going to hand back over to Louise now, who's going to talk to you about some of the types of tests you might experience.
Okay, Helen, can I just check that you're seeing that slide? Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, Helen. Just to pick up on a couple of questions put in the chat. We estimate about 10% of employers are using gamified tests. An example of an employer that we know is using them is PwC. You may well find out from the details sent you by the employer if that's what they're going to be using. But if you are looking at graduates first, you can register as a student, log on. Helen's going to tell you more about that in a moment. You will get access to gamified tests, and you will get information about employers and the kinds of tests they're using. Just also to pick up on something that Helen said, which goes with a question in the chat, with the situational judgment test question, always answer honestly. And if you feel that your answer is going to be really different to the answer that you think the employer may be expecting, then perhaps that does raise a possibility of you not maybe being a very good fit for that role. You know, maybe it's not quite the opportunity for you. So that's just something to bear in mind. So moving on to verbal reasoning tests. These are often timed, and it's important to do them at a good, steady pace so you avoid the temptation of making wild guesses and getting the wrong answer, but also avoid getting stuck on a question that really won't help you. You might not know the answer to that particular one, but that's not to say you'll find other questions equally difficult. So don't despair if you find a question difficult. Give your best answer and move on. Here's an example of a verbal reasoning test question. It's really important, as I said before, when we looked at situational judgment tests, to carefully read the information. Don't be tempted to draw on your own knowledge of the subject. Just go off the information they give you, because that's what they're assessing you against. So with this one, it's asking you to read the text and to give your view on these questions. True, false, cannot say. Now, some people don't like saying cannot say. It's like, well, I should be able to say one way or the other, but cannot say is a perfectly legitimate response. So we've had a look at this, and this is what we would say are the correct responses to these questions. Okay. Now, because we still have a lot to cover in this session, if you wanted to have a look at this in more detail, please do so when the recording is available. So, numerical reasoning tests. These are also very common. If your degree doesn't involve working with numbers, don't panic. The level of numeracy required to succeed is usually at GCSE maths level. Now, if you're an international student, let me explain that that's a UK qualification that 16-year-olds do while at school. Now, the BBC has a free revision guide for GCSE maths. It's part of their bite-sized series. And if you go onto the Careers Service website, we will suggest other ways that you can brush up your numeracy skills. And indeed, we will be running a numeracy session, and Helen will tell you a little bit about that later on. So we're going to be running that for the first time, and it's just perfect for somebody who's maybe not as confident as they might be in terms of their numerical skills, and we're going to have a session specially for you. Now, numerical reasoning tests typically are timed, and as I say, you will need to just go through the test at a good steady rate. Brushing up on your skills before doing that will make a big difference. Now, here is a sample question. And here you're being asked to give the ratio of perfume essence to water. Now, if you brush up on your skills, you'll know not to confuse this with a proportion. Okay, very easy mistake to make. And so here is the correct answer. Again, if you wanted to have a good think about this, you can do so by looking at the recording, which we will make available to you. But if you got it wrong, it's possible you were thinking about proportion and not a ratio. Now, you would typically be allowed to have a calculator, and that would make it a lot easier for you. Just moving on. Here is an example of a logical reasoning test question. And this is all about spotting patterns and logical sequences. These are also a feature of inductive and critical reasoning tests. And these tests are particularly common for IT, science and engineering roles. And in this question, there's a logical sequence on the top row, and you need to select what follows on from this by selecting an option from the line below. So the correct answer is D. Okay. So the important thing with tests is to practice them so you become familiar with what to expect and to learn from your mistakes. Moving on to personality questionnaires. These aren't tests because there's no right or wrong personality type. They're not used as often as ability tests, so numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, inductive reasoning, which we've just touched on. And they may be used by some employers as a way of just getting to know you better. And they may introduce this in the final stages of recruitment. So they're not usually timed, no right and wrong answers, but it is important that you answer consistently. So be true to yourself, because these are sophisticated questionnaires and they will pick up on inconsistent answers. So typically what happens is you answer a set of questions, and the outcome of that is that a profile will be generated. Now, this is an example of a 16 PF table, which is measuring different personality factors. You can see the range here, and responses will be recorded on a graph like this. And a recruiter would study this. And so, for example, they might be looking for certain personality traits. And if someone were applying for a role where role consciousness was a key part of it, then there could be concerns if an applicant scored very low on this. So it might be that they are focusing on particular personality traits. As I say, personality questionnaires are not as commonly used as part of the recruitment process as ability tests. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to you, Helen, so you can say a little bit about Graduate First.
Thanks, Louise. Okay, sorry, I was just busy responding in the chat. Let me just get to the right place, one sec. Right, so there have been some questions in the chat while we've been talking about where to find all of these great resources. So I'm going to show you very briefly that, but then take you through to Graduates First that Louise just mentioned, and show you how you can actually access these tests. So this is the psychometric testing page on our career service website for the University of Manchester. I've put the link in the chat just recently as well, if you want to get through here. Now, if you scroll down here, obviously there's videos that you can watch and all sorts of other things, but where you can get the free test help is this link here called Graduates First. So if you were to scroll further down, there's all tests where you can practice aptitude tests and all sorts of other resources down there. But I'm going to show you Graduates First for now. So when I click on this, it takes me to a page which tells me all about how to register. There was a question before about somebody who is a recent graduate and can you still access this? The answer is yes. You would normally have to access the platform with your university email address, so your student.manchester email address. But if you've just recently graduated, you won't have that anymore. So please get in touch with our career service through either web chat or a question, raise a question in Career Connect, and they will be able to help you and give you the right access to Graduates First. So this is a bit about the platform. This is the link here at the top that you go to register. So if I click on that now, this is what you get to. You would go to login or register for the first time. If you register, you use your University of Manchester email address, and then it will take you to the free site. We've had a problem recently where somebody just searched on Google for Graduates First and went in that way, and actually it doesn't then recognise you as a University of Manchester student, and therefore it tries to make you pay. If you get to a site that tries to make you pay or pay to upgrade to more content, you're in the wrong place. So just go back to the start, and if there's a problem, get in touch with us. So you would log in here. And then once you have logged in, you get to a page that looks like this. So you can see on this page, you've got all of these tests that Louise or I have been talking about in this session. You've got numerical, verbal, logical, mock assessment. So that's just a few of them. Now, if you just want to have a bit of a quick go, you can click play on any of these and it will just give you a single test to have a go at. If maybe you want to explore a bit more yourself, then I would recommend going to this navigation bar down the left-hand side to My Practice. So if you click on this, it actually gives you the full range of all of the different tests that you might encounter as part of an assessment process. So you can see there's the game-based assessment. So that's where I got the balloon popping from before. So if I click on Take Assessment here, you will see that these all pop up. The balloon popping is BART here, commonly known as BART. So if you want to have a go at that in your own time and get your own results, you can click here. There's all sorts of other games-based tests on there as well. If it's the more standard tests that you're looking for, like the numerical reasoning, the verbal reasoning, you'll find those here. So you could click on Take Assessment, and all of these are just different versions of tests. So they'll give you different questions, different data tables, that sort of thing for each test. So you can choose which one you do. You can also repeat them as well. It may not make a difference, but you might just want to see if you've learned from the experience of doing it once. So that is how you access and navigate Graduates First, but please do go and have a play with that in your own time. Now, before, Louise just mentioned the session that I'm going to be running, which is on numerical reasoning, but it's taking it to the level where it's not just going to tell you where to go to practice. We're actually going to do some basic maths. So I've been working with a math student, third-year math student, who some of you may have heard of. He's called Harry Surplus. He's famous on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram. He's been interviewed by the BBC and the Manchester Evening News because in his spare time, he goes on TikTok and puts maths videos on there. He's a brilliant guy, wants to be a teacher. And so he's working with me to run this session so that you can just re-look. It's more of a refresher session of your numerical reasoning ability. So we'll go through a few examples, you'll have a go yourself, he'll show you how to work it out, and there'll be a few tips and tricks along the way there as well. So it's taking place on the 19th of October. You'll find full details of it in Career Connect. It's on campus, so it's in person, face-to-face, and we're also going to have some math students who have volunteered to walk around the room and just help you if you're feeling a bit stuck with anything. So if you're worried at all about numerical ability, then do join us at that session. Okay, Louise, I think that's probably it from me. Do you want to take control back?
Lovely, thank you, Helen. And can you just see my slide?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So a few common questions. Tests are not normally negatively marked, but with reasoning tests, employers will be looking at both speed and accuracy. So negative marking simply means where you lose a point for getting a wrong answer. So we would recommend working as quickly but as accurately as you can through an ability test. But don't give up. Practice tests whenever you can and use the results to see where the gaps are, if any of your skill set are not a fit or you've got areas for development. We've seen students who have gone from a low performance in a practice test through to a successful selection for graduate roles because they have practiced and learnt from their mistakes. Moving on to declaring a disability, this is clearly a personal choice. And if you would like to discuss this with a careers consultant, you can make an appointment to speak to us in confidence. We have some pages on our website all about this, but employers always say to us that they much prefer it if somebody contacts them in advance of doing some tests so they can make reasonable adjustments, so they can take your needs into account. If you were to notify them of a particular need after you've done the tests, then they can't make those adjustments because you've done the tests. But do come and talk this through with us if you think that would be helpful. This point here, should I just give up? Well, from our experience, if you're here taking part in this session, it shows you're super motivated. You now know where you can practice these tests. So you will improve by having a go. So we would say, no, don't give up. But don't forget, there are lots of employers that don't use psychometric tests as part of the recruitment process. So if you're an international student and you're wondering if you could take a test in your own language, it's always worth asking the employer if that is possible. So the kinds of employers that use psychometric tests as part of the recruitment process will want you to contact them with any queries you may have in advance of doing the tests, and you can put this question to them. So do contact us directly if you have any queries about this. The careers service is available via live chat, or you could pop into the first floor of University Place, 10 till 4, Monday to Friday, and have a chat with somebody in person. So just moving on. If you're on Career Connect, do make use of our pathways. We have one for assessments, and here you go, get assessment, test and interview ready. That includes information about psychometric tests, and as you can see, there are others as well. Do use our website and do have a look at our recordings, because we have made other recordings around psychometric tests that you could access via YouTube. So there's lots of help available. Helen has already talked to you about this brilliant session that we're trialling on Wednesday, 19th of October. You can register for that on Career Connect. Do hope you can join us for that. It's a great opportunity to refresh your basic math skills. And as I was trying to point out through that sample numeracy reasoning test question, it's terribly easy to confuse basic things like ratios and proportions. And if you go along to a session like this, you will get a chance to brush up your skills on things like that. Other sessions that we're going to be running this semester, well, we've got Get Ready for Situational Judgment Tests. That's in person, Wednesday, 2nd of November at lunchtime. And then we're going to have another session similar to this in person on Wednesday, 16th of November. So before we do a final poll, are there any questions in the chat, Helen, that we can answer, or any questions that you would like to put to us by unmuting?
Hi Louise, so I think I'm roughly on top of all of the questions in the chat. So there's quite a few about when is the session, how do I book onto it, that sort of thing. Do I need to book onto it? Yes, you do. The numerical, numeracy refresher session, 19th of October, go on to Career Connect. Look on the 19th of October in the calendar and you'll see it. Click on there and you can register. Once you've registered, it means that you then get reminders. You'll get something sent to you by emails where you can just click and add it to your calendar. And also, as long as you are registered and you tell us that you've attended in the session, then we'll be able to send you all of the resources afterwards that we use during that numeracy session. There was a question about somebody about, what's classed as a disability. So what you were saying, Louise, has obviously sparked a thought for somebody. It's probably not appropriate to go into lots about disability in this session, but there are loads of resources on our website. I've put the link in the chat there about maybe how to approach an employer, how to explain your disability, how to ask for adjustments. But also, if you are somebody who considers yourself to have a disability or a health concern that might get in the way of any assessment process, please do book an appointment. We've got some specific hour-long appointments for you. to talk about any barriers that you might face, how you might need to talk about it, what even you're eligible for, and what rights you have. So have a look for those in the appointments section of Career Connect, and one of our careers team will be able to talk that through with you on a more personal one-to-one basis rather than
just to sort of chip in there. Absolutely do make an appointment to come and speak to us on a one-to-one basis, and also have a look at the pages on disability on our website. Very often what an employer will do, if you've given them advance notice of your needs, is to allow you extra time for these tests, perhaps 25% extra time. Or it might be that, having looked at what your needs are, they decide that it's not appropriate for you to do those tests. But employers say to us that they much prefer it if somebody does reach out to them, so they can make reasonable adjustments. But do have a look at the information on our website, because it's there to help you. Any other questions?
Yeah, are there any differences between assessments taken remotely and ones that they ask you to go to?
Okay, so the nature of the test won't tend to vary because it's online or it's in person. Now, a lot of recruiters are using online tests at the start of the recruitment process. As I said early on in the presentation, there's a very practical reason for them doing that. It drives down the number of applicants that go through to the next stage. Now, it's possible that when you get past that stage, further on, you're asked to come along to an assessment centre, possibly in person, and you may be asked to do psychometric tests as part of that. Now, they're likely to be different to the ones that you did right at the start, but again, they'll have the same aim. You know, they will be testing your ability. There may be a questionnaire around personality, but the aim of the test will be exactly the same.
Okay, thanks, Louise. So there's questions about once people have graduated, what do they have access to? Yes, you have access for the full 2 years after you've graduated. Just before you're due to graduate, you will get an email from the Career Service with all the details about what you can still access, what you need to tell us. So you need to get in touch with us to say, I still want access, and we will sort that out for you. But yes, anything that you get now, you get for 2 years afterwards. So that's appointments, it's online sessions, it's on campus sessions, access to all the resources, access to Career Connect where all the vacancies are, all the job opportunities. So yeah, full access for 2 years. Someone has said, will the maths session be online? Right, so this is the very first time that we're running it. It's a bit of a pilot. We're seeing how it goes. If it's successful and popular, then what we might do is try and do more of these next year. We are going to try and record it, but whether that works or not is another matter. So if it records and records well, then we will share that on our YouTube channel. If not, you might just have to look out for a future session to come along to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
good question from someone, and I wasn't aware of this, so I'm going to follow this up. Someone said that they tried to register on the numeracy session, but they're already registered for the STEM fair on the same day, and the system won't let them register for both. I'm going to take that away, Victoria, and I'm going to get back to you to let you know what's possible, because obviously that doesn't make sense to me. So we might be able to sort something out so you can attend both. So leave that with me.
Okay, Helen. So I'm going to launch the end poll. For those of you watching this presentation as a recording, before we clicked on record, we asked all the participants to partake in a poll, and we're now going to repeat that. So I'm just going to launch that now. So it'd be great if you could take part. That's super. So thank you for taking part in this poll. Very pleased to see that the person who previously said it was bothering them hasn't recorded that response this time round. So really delighted to see that the numbers, feeling quite confident and very confident, have gone up. So that's absolutely terrific. I'm now going to end that poll, Helen. I think we've had a chance to capture the information and share the results. There you go. And just move on with some final slides. So we've had a chance for you to put some questions to us. We're really grateful to you for participating in this session. We hope that it's given you a flavour of what to expect when you do a psychometric test. Please do have a look at our videos on our YouTube channel. Do come along to our other workshops, and please do engage with employers. We've got some fairs coming up. If you go to the events section of our website, that's careers.manchester.ac.uk, you will find the information there, and that's a great opportunity to speak directly to them. And it's absolutely fine to ask them about the recruitment process. That's the kind of question they would expect to answer. But always have a look at the information that they send you, because they will try and be as transparent as possible. And very often when we see students, the answer to their question is actually included in the information that the employer has sent them. Some key sort of takeaways from this session. Do use Graduates First. We subscribe to that, so you can register for free and use their tests. Do practice, because that will make a difference. And do make use of our one-to-one appointments if you want to talk through any concerns that you may have. You can book those via Career Connect. And finally, use Career Connect for the learning pathways, which we've referenced, and also for finding out about future events and vacancies. We are the most targeted university by employers, and we have hundreds of vacancies on our site which have been uploaded by employers, and we get new ones on our system on a daily basis. Helen, any final words from you?
No, just want to say thanks to everyone for joining. Hope you enjoyed the session, and I look forward to seeing some of you on campus soon.